Hi, everyone. My name is Priscilla Agoncillo. I am here today to talk to you about the importance of cannabis genetics. I am co-founder of the Original Breeders League. We are a multiple award-winning cannabinoid genetics farm. And I am also president of the Cannabinoid Industry Association. Very, very excited to be here with Foxbo and Cannabis Magazine as a returning speaker. And we're today going to talk about, again, the importance of cannabis genetics. So a lot of you may be coming in for the first time. This is your first time exploring, hemp, CBD, cannabis, and you might be asking, well, what really is cannabis? So I'll touch on a few basic things so that we can get into the conversation of what cannabis genetics is and why it's so important. So all forms of cannabis belong to a single species of plant called the Cannabis sativa L. There are thousands of different varietals and phenotypes of cannabis genetics that express differing characteristics from cannabinoid profiles, terpenoid profiles, as well as display all different types of physical plant characteristics, from short and bushy to tall and sparse, and even display a very wide range of colors. You can see purples, oranges, pinks, and even greens. Each unique genetic is useful for many different purposes. You can use it for fiber, oil, protein, terpenes, and of course, cannabinoids. Cannabinoids for a multitude of medical uses. Now, the various combination and ratio of these different characteristics have shown very promising results in medical use, from assistance with sleep, relaxation, inflammation, pain management, up to assisting with even more serious medical issues, such as the reduction of seizures. Now, the most commonly known cannabinoids extracted from the cannabis plant is THC or CBD, which I'm sure you've heard much about. Back in 2016, there was a study, and back then they identified about 144 different cannabinoids within the cannabis plant. We are now up to 400, a little more than 400. So very exciting times to be part of the cannabis industry as we are learning more and more information and really unlocking all these different aspects that could solve many different problems, from practical uses to medical uses, all being unlocked within cannabis genetics. So how does medicinal cannabis actually work? And again, when I say cannabis, this also refers to CBD, because CBD is part of the Cannabis sativa plant. So I just want to help to promote the education about that word and start to destigmatize some of the negativity associated when people try to identify cannabis versus CBD. So it works through our endocannabinoid system. Now, the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS system, is our molecular master regulatory system of the body. It's responsible for balancing integral processes all throughout the body, such as cellular communication, metabolism, immune response, and various other physiological processes. The endogenous cannabinoid system is the most significant system in the body in maintaining and establishing human health, and that's mainly because of homeostasis. CB1 and CB2 receptors bind to cannabinoid receptors that are found all throughout your body, again, from immune cells to your brain, working to establish that homeostasis. The homeostasis that the endocannabinoid system is in charge of is very important to health, because unbalanced biological processes can result in a myriad of unwanted symptoms, such as headaches, obesity, epilepsy, inflammation, as well as pain. So because of this, the endocannabinoid system can be used to focus on many different diseases, since it directly or even indirectly affects most physiological processes. So that's how important the endocannabinoid system is. Now, going into what I mentioned earlier before, what is THC? What is CBD? We'll get into CBD after this. So the molecular structure between THC and CBD is actually very similar. The molecular structure is 21 carbon atoms. You can kind of look all of this up online. It was first discovered and isolated in 1964 by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam. And THC is the main psychoactive compound in cannabis that binds with your cannabinoid 1 or CB1 receptors in the brain. It's also known for making you feel that high feeling or the euphoric feeling. THC is known for many different things. It's known to help with pain, glaucoma, insomnia, low appetite, anxiety, and nausea, to name a few. Now, what is CBD? So again, very, very similar, basically the same molecular structure as THC. It was also discovered and first isolated by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam. So CBD, the main difference is people do not report the euphoric feeling or the high feeling, which is why it's favored in a lot of different, gummies or day-to-day supplements, because you don't have that euphoric feeling, that mental high that comes along with THC. Now, legally, at least federally in the United States, CBD cannot contain more than 0.3% of THC. So CBD is used to help with, again, various different things: seizures, pain, inflammation, psychosis. It helps with anxiety, so relaxation. Different types of bowel diseases and migraine. CBD is a wonderful, wonderful cannabinoid that helps many different things if you're able to take advantage and unlock its potential. So I won't spend too much time on the history of cannabis taxonomy, but there's many different parts to it, and I'll allow you to go into that because I want time to go into more of the cannabis genetics. So you're going to hear things such as landrace strains. Landrace strains are you can consider them the original cannabis strains. They're the ancestors of the massive variety of different hybrids that we enjoy using today. So some of the most popular landrace genetics that you'll hear of is Afghani, Durban Poison, Lamb's Breath or Lamb's Bread. That's from Jamaica, Chocolate Thai, and Acapulco Gold. Land races are very, very important because they serve as the basis for a lot of these genetics, again, mentioned earlier, that we are using today, the popular strains, especially in more recreational uses. Landrace strains have a lot of amazing potent characteristics about them. So I'll go into the difference between landrace and hybrids. So hybrid strains or hybrid cannabis is a product of crossbreeding between two different cannabis strains and two different sexes. Types of the most popular hybrid strains are vitamin CBD, Cannatonic, White Widow, AK-47. Those are just a few of the names that you'll hear about hybrid strains. Now, those in hemp and CBD, if you've heard of smokable hemp or smokable CBD, which is a really hot topic within the CBD space, what you are actually, the difference between something like that versus a fiber varietal that's growing for fiber, you will have different tastes and different flavors. You'll also have different ratios of the CBD in it, and that allows it to be a little bit more of an enjoyable experience. Because if you're smoking or if you're ingesting something like a smokable hemp that wasn't a hybrid and had some other aspects of terpenoids that were bred into it, it really wouldn't be an enjoyable experience. It would taste more like grass and hay, and it wouldn't have anything fragrant in it. So smokable hemp is coming from a form of a hybrid strain. Now, why are cannabis genetics so important? Well, the impact of cannabis genetics to the market is great. Cannabis genetics can affect every part of the market in several ways. When you have the right cannabis genetics, it'll improve the efficiencies of your cultivation operation. You could have higher yields, stronger plants to withstand environmental attacks. You'll have better quality product to increase profitability. Another example of how it's important and how it would impact your business is, without the proper cannabis genetics, it wouldn't grow in the climate that it wasn't made for. So you have to have acclimatized genetics in order for it to be grown and in order for it to work well in your environment. Again, without proper acclimatized genetics, even the strongest types of plants will not survive in an environment that the genetics are not made for. And then how it impacts on extraction. The right cannabis genetics will produce higher yields and be cleaner because a strong genetic will have less microbials, molds, and diseases to extract. Now, current problems in the market. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are jumping into the space, maybe let's say starting on the cultivation side, and you actually don't know what type of genetics you're getting. Even if you are receiving a COA or a certificate of analysis from a lab that tells you what the percentages are, you still don't know if that is a cherry wine hemp strain or whatever it is. It's an unverified genetic. So the problem that causes is many farmers in both hemp and cannabis have purchased millions of dollars of seeds and plants that end up not being the genetics that they were told it would be. As an example, in the hemp industry, where regulations are strict with the limit of how much THC percentage can be identified in a plant, it would be a very big problem when you plant something that goes hot or above the 0.03% THC, and then you have to destroy your crop because you're not compliant. So you can see how much time and problems that would cause, how much waste of money that would be. So we really have to correct that and have a very strong system of verified genetics, not just ones that get great reviews online, or we need to have a more solid system to be able to verify genetics. Another problem that the genetics have a role in is inefficient cultivation. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but many farmers have planted genetics not able to withstand their environment. So as an example, if one day the temperature spikes or reaches a very low temperature, many farms have lost their entire crops because the plants, again, weren't genetically strong enough to withstand that particular environment. So it's very important to have acclimatized genetics. And another problem that this genetics can also cause, if we don't really focus on understand the importance of genetics, is the lack of diversity. Diversity is very important to have innovation in the marketplace. It's what we're seeing now is the same exact genetics being grown and bred all across, the United States. Everyone's growing the same sort of genetics, which will drive down the price of the product that you are actually growing on the cultivation side. And again, it lacks for innovation in the marketplace. We're not really exploring new products with expressing other type of cannabinoid profiles. There's a severe lack of diversity. So that's another thing that we can correct through advancing genetics as part of the industry. And that goes into my next slide, the advancement of cannabis genetics. So what we can do, we can breed, we can preserve. So breeding, preservation, and micropropagation of genetics. This is really the future and the pathway to have a very strong segment of cannabis genetics in the cannabis industry. So here are the different methods and methods of preservation and micropropagation. I see a typo there. That's kind of interesting. But tissue culture. So tissue culture is in vitro cultivation of plant cells or tissue under aseptic and controlled environmental conditions in liquid or on semi-solid or agar. It's a well-defined nutrient medium for the production of primary and secondary metabolites to regenerate a plant. So basically what they do is they take some nodes off of the plant, some plant tissue. They grow it in an agar, a medium that has all the nutrients necessary, that is very clean and sterile. And then they start to grow the plant from that specimen. As the plant grows in a very sterile environment, they're able to monitor it, they're able to take diseases out, they're able to clean it in that very lab. It's a laboratory environment, and it's under strict observation. There is also seed banking. There's more and more companies starting to develop that are providing cryogenic storage. This is not new technology. It's been used throughout the agriculture industry. So seed banking is becoming more and more available to cannabis breeders and growers. And again, cryogenic storage is favored for the preservation of DNA, tissue, and germplasm, because at extremely low temperatures, it's believed that it will stop most biological activity. There is genotyping. This really helps with breeding because the test has valuable applications for growers, breeders, distributors, and regulators. This includes confirming the cultivar identity across the supply chain. So that first problem that I mentioned in the marketplace of not having verified genetics, genotyping will really assist with that. There's some companies that have been more on the cannabis recreational side that have been starting their databases, and they've accumulated a lot of data, but there's still so much work to be done, including on within the hemp side of the market. So this will help, again, confirm the cultivar identity across the supply chain. It will help to inform decision-making for plant breeding. You are going to be able to tell right away if you want to cultivate a crop for a very specific purpose. You will need genotyping to help you identify which plants are growing what very quickly in order for you to have a very efficient cultivation operation for its purpose. And then it's also very helpful for monitoring for any type of variation. Whenever you're dealing with a plant in nature, you're always going to have variation that you will see as a result. You could plant, the same plant, and all of the seeds that come out when you pop those seeds and it grows into plants, you'll see purple flowers, short stalks, long stalks. You'll see a whole entire many different variations, even though it's coming from the same mother and father. And that's again because of all the genetics and the DNA that could be combined together, the recessive and the dominant genes. And the last thing is whole genome sequencing. So this is a little bit more complicated, a lot more costly. I'm looking forward to the day where whole genome sequencing will be affordable for people in the industry. But whole genome sequencing is the process of determining the complete DNA sequence. Genotyping is looking at a snapshot of it. Whole genome sequencing is looking at the whole entire DNA sequence. So this is much more detail, and it entails sequencing all of an organism's chromosomal DNA, as well as DNA contained in the mitochondria for plants. It's in the chloroplast. So this will help give us so much more information to really help to preserve and breed for different types of purposes, and save those genetics and be much more efficient with propagating them through through tissue culture and micropropagation than we've ever had access to in the past in the cannabis industry. So the breeding of cannabis genetics. Now, understanding breeding. When these chromosomes combine, when you are breeding with different sexes, a male and a female plant, you're using pollen to impregnate the plant so that it can start to produce seeds. What it means is a unique arrangement of expressed and non-expressed genes that are formed. And again, I mentioned this earlier, this is why a crop, even a crop that's been pollinated by a single male plant with known genetics, you'll get an offspring that possesses wildly different phenotypes and cannabinoid profiles. So the types of breeding that you're going to be seeing is traditional breeding and selection. That's going through the process of popping seeds, and selecting from those plants which ones are the most rigorous, which one you can look for many different purposes. You can look for what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it makes you feel like, what it looks like. Those are all different categories that you can do your selection based off of. So you can imagine, you would need the larger the sample size, the more in the thousands that you can see the differences of, the better your selection process will be. There's also genetic modification, which is the modification that's happening. There's many programs right now that are genetically modifying the cannabis DNA. There's also technology that's happening in CRISPR, for example, with cannabis genetics, and that is not the modification of the DNA, but the turning on and the turning off of certain genetic traits within the DNA. And then there's crossbreeding and selection. So crossbreeding is when you take two different types of plants, two different DNA, and you try to stabilize it through the process of breeding. Now, what makes a cannabis genetic valuable? The value of cannabis genetics are a combination of values, actions, and attributes. The easiest point to really understand is the efficiency of a company's cultivation operations is really directly correlated to the quality of genetics that can perform optimally in specific climates and environments. Many companies have lost valuable time and resources cultivating genetics that did not survive and thrive within their infrastructure. The value of proprietary genetics is that it can produce oil, really, that creates products that no other companies can offer. Many companies are white labeling their products, which basically mean that these products are using the same basic cannabis or CBD oil in their formulas. But in the case of having oil extracted from cultivars that no other company has, this allows those companies to really offer unique type of products that no one else can provide, with full traceability back to the genetics. So you have more of a solid, story and history that consumers really want to know what they're taking into their bodies. Lastly, another contributor to having unique genetics is if the cultivars or the company producing the genetics are award-winning and branded. This allows for consumers to have a sense of trust in the product. When you have an award-winning company, for example, you know that it's, well, especially as this industry is getting started, you really had to go through word of mouth. And that's how most of the awards were being won, because great product was putting out there and the community dialed in and said, okay, this is a really great product. It's having a great effect on me. A lot of people are reporting the same things. And that's where you come up with the fact that award-winning companies and those types of products that are created for them are contribute to the value of what their genetics are and what they can do for your brand. So when companies have access to these genetics or proprietary genetics, or things that plants and plant types that other companies don't have access to, it really allows their portfolio to have history behind it, and also have some credibility as far as where is the history of this plant and who else has access to it. So what steps do I take to incorporate genetics into my business model? When you're sourcing a farm to purchase biomass from, let's say you want to do extraction and you want to make sure that the source of your product is coming, you want to understand where the source of your product is. It would be good to probably ask if they have a breeding program in place. A proper breeding program is important because, again, it's essential for innovation and for the enhancement and preservation of genetics. So a proper breeding program with scalable and executable SOPs will ensure an ongoing advancement and stabilization of the genetics. So that's what I would definitely recommend to look for, is find out, what they have in their breeding or preservation of their genetics if you're talking to a farm. Now, what is important in a breeding program? I would say access to a robust and diverse genetic library. You can associate that to a painter with how many colors they have in their palette. The more colors, the more things that you can create, unique expressions of it. Do they have access to the technology and the systems for efficiency in breeding, such as analytical testing, tissue culture, micropropagation, and again, that robust and diverse genetic library. I would also look if the company has even the experience, the breeding talent and the expertise to truly run a proper breeding program, because a lot of this work has to be mastered over time. So finding breeders, really true breeders that have done the work is very rare. It has taken many years. It can take many years to stabilize a strain, 5 to 10 years to stabilize a strain. So that work is very tedious, which is one of the reasons why you don't have many true breeders out there that are solely focusing on breeding and preserving genetics and creating new types of plants. So again, investigate if the company has the breeding talent and expertise to truly run a proper breeding program. Even PhDs and new scientists coming into the space from other agricultural industries, they'll understand a lot, but cannabis is a completely different plant. It's a new plant. Again, just from 2016 till now, it's been more than 3 times the amount of cannabinoids that we've even been able to identify in a very short amount of time. Again, most companies don't really have access to experienced talent breeders, just because of that reason. This industry has really developed into a multi-billion-dollar industry in the last few years. So it's very important that we're getting and having the talent come through, that the talent that comes through that can really assist with the advancement of breeding into the future. So let's see here. Now, to understand why there's a shortage of breeders in the field, I would go into an understanding the history of breeding in cannabis. Traditionally, it has been a very negative experience for many veteran cannabis breeders due to the previous state of illegality. Breeders were forced to work without any of the resources of today's technology. There were no access to laboratories and the infrastructure of the industry to support this type of work. Okay, I will take a question. Let's see, we'll take a quick break for a question. So I have one saying, I'm based in Europe, wondering how big a sector breeding is in the US. So Europe, I would say, is the grandfather and grandmother of breeding and genetics and cannabis genetics. Spain, for example, has been doing it for a very long time. There was a lot more commerce involved because you're allowed to sell or cultivate seeds and sell them as souvenirs. They're not considered seeds; they're considered souvenirs through Europe, or specifically in Spain. So they've been providing a lot of different seeds around the world, actually. Obviously, everyone knows Amsterdam. That's also a very big hub. So breeding in the U.S. is becoming much more important, especially that the US has become a very big hub for all of the cannabis industry, particularly North America. So you have Canada and the US. And so it's becoming even more important as the industry rolls out in both cannabis and hemp. Hemp farmers, again, are experiencing really industrial scale problems with not having the right genetics. So a lot of the companies, even on the pharmaceutical side, are really looking into cannabis genetics because it's important for what their end goal is, whether it's to produce an anti-seizure medication or for the plants just to survive in a specific microclimate, which answers the next question is how critical would you say climate is to breeding? So climate, you can really acclimatize any of the genetics through time and through care. It's incredibly important for the survival of your plants if you're going into cultivation. Breeding, that's your tool to create plants that would survive in certain environments. So climate is a variable that you can work towards. So that's how I would say it's critical to the process if it's one of the goals that you have. So yes, I'll move on to the next slide before answering a couple more questions there. I just opened up the box. Sorry about the wait to answer that. So the exciting thing is we want more breeders in the space. Never has there ever been in the history of cannabis more technology and resources available to breeders. You have amazing high-tech laboratories, really dialed in processes for tissue culture, micropropagation, which you can, I met with a company that was able to achieve a times 15 multiplication rate, which is incredible. So I really want to encourage more and more breeders into the space because you're going to have all the resources at your fingertips to do amazing work. Now, next slide here. Oh. Okay, great. So that is basically it for the presentation. I'll open it up now to more and more questions. My contact information is here. So feel free to, if I don't get to answer it within this time segment, feel free to contact me to any of the above. We also work with a team of amazing breeders from all around the world. So, you know, from Spain to one is in Thailand, another one is in South America. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. So let's see here. Let me answer a couple more. Let's see here. Kind of answered that. I can answer a personal question. How I got into this area. I got into the industry through actually advocacy. I started with fighting for patients' rights on the cannabis side. My grandfather was sick, and I started researching different ways to holistically treat him. And unfortunately, he thought he basically said he wouldn't use cannabis or anything of that nature to treat himself because he didn't want to die a criminal. So he unfortunately suffered a very prolonged and you know, painful death, unfortunately, from cancer. But it made me want to really focus on educating and bringing this to mainstream as a real viable option for people to treat themselves and their loved ones. So another question from Haley is, I've noticed a lot of people say they grow indoors. So there's, in my opinion, there's two different types of products that you have. You have the product that you grow indoors, which you produce, and they are producing some amazing product. hemp and CBD should only really be grown outdoors. That's the most viable option if you're going into the hemp CBD space. But for cannabis, indoor grow is a really great option. It's very heavy on the costs. There's ways now that you can grow it organically. And this is one of the things that I would have to express, because if you're looking into medical cannabis or medical cannabinoids, there really is a distinct difference between product that was grown with synthetics and chemicals versus product that was grown organically. There are increasingly more and more regimens and programs that allow you to grow indoors with more organic, like completely organic, which in the marketplace on the recreational side is actually getting like the top price or dollar in its value. So I like both indoor and outdoor. My preference always is going to be sun-grown greenhouse cannabis, because there's something that indoor hasn't really figured out yet, and that would be, to really truly replace the sun in nature. In my experience, anytime I've had, the best of indoor cultivated medical cannabis versus greenhouse, sun-grown organic cannabis, my body has always reacted in favor to the organic greenhouse, sun-grown cannabis. So it's really, I encourage everyone to kind of go out there and explore and find out which is best for you, and don't limit yourself to the one negative experience that you've had, because you have to try different types of genetics in order to find out what actually works for you. There are some that really help with anxiety. There are some that really help you to sleep. I noticed a lot of the older patients that I've met don't really want to go to sleep until they're tired at the end of the night. So what I've recommended is to find something that works with them for the day, and use the one at night to help them to sleep and get that deep sleep so that they can start regenerating and having that restful sleep. So you have to try different things, because there are, again, thousands of different phenotypes and varietals, so many different ratios, so many different forms that you could take it. If you don't like smoking, you can vape. You can take it in a tincture, you could take it in an oil, you could take it in a brownie. There's so many different ways, capsules. So I encourage everyone to find what works best for them, because it really can be very life-changing. So let's see here. I think I answered most of the questions. Again, please feel free to connect with me further online. And I will see you soon. Thank you, team. Thank you, Voxpo, and thank you, Cannabis, for having the CBDIA and myself again presenting on your wonderful events.